Dear counselor, I believe you can help young people awake the giant that is in them. Quite a number of our young people are locked in. They just don't know what to do, they don't know how to become their best, and you can help them to become their best. And that's why I'm speaking to you as counselors to see how you can help our young people. For you to be a good help to a young person, a teenager, it's important for you to know or be acquainted with a few things, and I'm going to share about 10 of them with you to actually help you to become effective. Number one is the need for you to understand the contextual setting in which our young people operate. You see, our young people do not operate, they do not exist in isolation. They operate within an environment, within a setting. They exist within um, certain factors that surround them, and it is your own duty as a person to understand where they operate. Just like a fish operates within the water, you know, and the bird operates in the air the most. So it's important for you to understand the context of the setting within which our young people operate, so that you can then know how to influence or tinker around that. You know, we talk about in psychology, we talk about the nature nurture. So as much as people actually get influenced by their DNA, some of the internal component, there's the external factor, which is the environment. Okay, so we want to look at the context within which our young people operate, so that it's easier for you to know what to work around to get the best out of them. The first one is the environmental factor. You know, the environment where a young person live. What are the factors within that environment? Um, what are the things that exist within that environment? What are the values of that environment? For example, where do they live? Do they live in the village, in the city? What are the vices common within the environment they live? Albert Bandura, one of the psychologists who propounded the theory of social learning, posits that individuals learn from their environment. So whatever is happening, the kind of things that happen within the environment of a person will. So why do you need to understand the environmental context? Is that when you are dealing with a young person, you've got to gain understanding of where they live, where they operate from, where they are coming from, and so they operate with the environment. Then, aside from the environment context, environmental factor is the peer pressure factor. What kind of friends do they have? You know, you've got to understand that peer pressure dynamics, because young people are oftentimes living their life among their friends, their age group, and all that. And there is a lot of force that comes with people who are within your age bracket, people who you have certain things in common, you are peers, as it were. And peers often have effect on one another. And as a counselor, you've got to know the dynamics, the power within peer, because even some of the changes you are going to effect in young people, you may do better when you are able to get peers to influence peers. That's why we talk about peer leadership. So you've got to understand the peer dynamics. What are the dynamics that operate within young people interacting with themselves? Okay, you've got to know how these things work. And in my subsequent interaction with you, I'll be sharing some of these things with you. But just know that it's part of the context you've got to understand. You've got to also understand the family context, the family setting that that young person is coming from. You know, there are some families that are stable, there are some families that are unstable. So the stability or instability of the family will also affect the child. So it's a context within which that teenager is growing up. So you've got to understand it. That's why when you are doing counseling for a young person, you explore what is within the family context. Are they divorced? Are the parent divorced? Is any of the parent dead? Is this child living with somebody else and all that? Then you've got to know, okay, what are the educational level of the parents or the caregiver? What's the relationship that exists between the caregiver and the child and all of those things? Because the family context matter. You want to know, okay, is this child the firstborn, the secondborn, the lastborn? Again, because there is that factor of the position that that child occupies in the family. It will have an influence upon the family. So you've got to gain an insight into that as part of the context that surrounds the child. You want to also look at the community influence, the kind of community that child is growing up from. And when I'm talking about community, I'm talking about both cultural community and religious community. For example, a child from a Muslim community or a child from a Christian community. Now, either Muslim or Christian community, Are they from very fanatical community? Because these things all play out as young people are growing up because they are within what we call the impressionable age. And as a counselor, you've got to gain insight into this setting so that you can help them. I remember going to one of the schools, and then I met this young man um, who appeared quite unruly and all that, and was a deviant in the school setting. And then the principal and the teacher were a little bit uncomfortable with his behavior. And of course, myself on that day, I wasn't comfortable with his behavior. But with my understanding of some of these things, I was able to call this young man aside. First he was behaving somehow, but after talking to him for a while, I was able to get him out. And all that. He was actually coming from a fanatical religious setting, and his approach and his belief system was that he should become a cleric in that particular setting and then become more powerful so that he can do one or two things in a particular way. So he didn't really value the education that he was receiving as he should value it until I began to help him to reposition that, reframe that thought, and help his mind. No, it was because I understood the concept of the community impact on a child that actually made me to be able to go through what I needed to go through. So you've got to know which community does this child belong to: religious community, ethnic community, um, and cultural community. Because that understanding that all of these things are mentioned in either family or the community or the peer, all of these things are talking about the context, the setting within which that child is growing up. And then, of course, you cannot erase that the social media context, that exists now. A lot of our young people live their lives on the social media. In fact, they get a lot of their cue on the social media. And you will agree with me that in the last 10, 15 years, the social media had become like an environment. The virtual world has become a reality, either we like it or not. And as a counselor, you cannot take that out of the life of young people of this generation. Some 20, 30 years ago, most people really were not living their life on the social media. So maybe little impact of social media on their lives when they were young 30 years ago. But I'll tell you, in the last 15 years, the social media had become part. It has come to stay, and I would like to know, we must accept it. Okay, so what matters now is you understanding how this affects the young people, the setting, because the age bracket will determine how this thing affects them. So we have the Gen Z, and immediately after the Gen Z, we are already having the Alpha generation. So those who are in the secondary schools now are not Gen Z, so you don't mix it up. They are the Alpha generation, and the Alpha generation actually have a way of seeing things that it's like a multiplier effect of the negativity that we have in Gen Z is coming up with the Alpha generation, particularly because of the social media influence. So you've got to understand that context within which they're coming from. So as a result of you understanding that context, the setting within which they are coming from, then you must we then move to the second one, which is identifying the prevailing challenges, the challenges that are common, the vices that are common to that particular age bracket. And so you have vices like substance abuse, they are taking of cannabis, India M, Colorado, and all of those things. You put them under the category of substance abuse. You have the issue of abuse of the internet, misuse of the social media, and that's when we get internet fraud and sexual perversion that exists on the social media space and all of that. And that's because of the impact of the internet on them, the impact of the social media on quite a number of them. Then we talk about the sexual immorality that is becoming prevalent in this age and time. Quite a number of our young people are becoming sexually active, sexually immoral, not necessarily because they inherently are bad, but that's what they are exposed to. That's what the challenges they are facing in their generation. And as a counselor, you cannot shy away from that as part of their challenge. And your job is not to condemn them. Your job is actually to help them find solution. I hope you understand that. I repeat myself, as a counselor, your job is not to condemn them. Your job is to help them to find meaning, help them to think correctly, and accept them first and help them to think correctly. So I'm saying some of the vices that goes on in their generation include cultism, gangsterism, and that's what we have in most of our schools. And you see, cultism and gangsterism come out of the human need for acceptance, human need for socialization. You know, most of the problems that we often have among young people, in fact, among all human beings, they are born out of needs, what we call psychological needs. And Abraham Maslow defined them from the least, which is the physiological needs of man, to social needs of man. And one of the needs of man is that need of acceptance, need for love, need to want to be part of a group. And that is what is fueling young people's desire and push for gangsterism, cultism, and all that, because they really want to associate. And then you have another challenge of academic problem, the academic indifference, poor performance in school, and that's where we also have the issue of exam malpractices and all that. And that's because um, we are in a time where the narrative is being skewed against education. So you have quite a number of young people talk about education as scam, school as scam, and all of those things. And you've got to be aware that it's a problem. The attention span of our young people is going so low when it comes to education. Many of our young people are not really serious with their educational pursuit and all that. It's a general prevailing challenge that we have, and that's why you find out that some graduates who even finish from the university cannot write a simple letter or a simple application. And that's because there's a fundamental challenge. And now, again, I'm not saying that for you to be part of the plethora of people who complain about the problem. As a counselor, you don't complain about the problem. You understand the problem with the aim of preferring solutions to the problem. Okay, so as a counselor, you should be part of the problem. I'm be part of the solution to the problem. So my assignment now is actually helping you to see that these are the things you've got to be acquainted with. We've said first thing, you have to be acquainted with the context, the setting within which your client, especially which are students who are teenagers who belong to the alpha generation, the setting, the context within which they exist, and we've talked about them. And then we say you've got to be aware of the challenges that are peculiar to that generation. They are like as if you are doing business. They are like your customer, okay? And so you've got to do what we call customer analysis, which means that you've got to know the demography of your customer, the age bracket of your customer. So for you as a school counselor, the demography of your client is actually between 10, 9, 10, and say 18. In some instances you can have some 20, but usually between 10 and 20 if you are working within an environment where some of those young people have grown older by the time they are coming to school. All right. So the vices that are peculiar to them, and one of the challenges that are peculiar to them is emotional disorder. That's when some of them face depression. Some of them get into suicidal ideation. Some of them even have self-worth problem. They have low self-esteem and all of that. And that's because when they are at that age, there is a lot of imbalance in their emotions, due to the fact that at that stage their hormones are just some of the hormones are just trying to go up and balance up. And so sometimes, based on their experiences, based on their exposure, based on the way they are thinking and all of that, some of these hormones can be directed wrongly. So they begin to have some wrong feelings and all of that. And you've got to know that. And part of the things that happen during that time is also the fact that it's a time where they begin to have affinity for the opposite sex. And so it's that time there is more consciousness of them probably wanting to have a boyfriend, wanting to have a girlfriend. And it's not your job as the counselor to condemn them and say, oh no, you're not supposed to have a boyfriend at this age, you're not supposed to have a girlfriend at this age. While it is true that you've got to find a way to discourage them from channeling their energy that way, you've got to be very professional at doing the job so that you provide them enough reason mentally for them to be able to. But for them to be able to channel rightly. But first is that you've got to understand that this is the situation they have. So what's your job as a counselor? What should be your goal as a counselor? Number one, you want to help them to become self-aware. You want them to be able to gain personal identity. You want them to know themselves, understand themselves, because it is from their self-awareness that we can then move them to conscious self-development. So you get them to be self-aware. You want them to actually gain clarity, particularly moral clarity, ethical understanding of life and how the society works. With that, it helps them to be able to make right decisions. Because when you help them to really understand themselves, they are aware of themselves, those that are male know that they are male. Those that are female know that they are female. They know why they think the way they think. They know why they behave the way they behave. You help them to actually clarify the moral values they are supposed to embrace and all of that. It makes right decision making better for them because you have helped them to clarify. And those are your job. Those are your goals. That's what you are working towards as a counselor. Then you want to actually help them to focus on their academics. You want them to focus on their education. So part of your effort is to carry out activities that help them to enhance academic focus. And then you want them to actually have very healthy peer relationship. You want them to know how to develop healthy relationship with their peers, even with their parents. Okay, so you are teaching them, you're training them on how you are exposing them to trainings, environment, situations that will help them develop healthy relationship, and then also help them to develop very good emotional intelligence, so that they are emotionally intelligent, and then their minds can grow appropriately. You are giving them information, exposing them to activities that can help them grow their mind. That's why some of those your counseling activity in form of extracurricular activity and other counseling programs that you are doing for them, like career exposure and all of that, they are all meant to be aimed at helping them to grow mentally. All right. And then you should also aim at helping those of them you have identified with leadership quality to grow their leadership ability. So you help them to develop, because from that age you will begin to see traits, leadership traits. Many of them were born with the leadership traits. Some of them have it inherent in them, and then but circumstance and situation actually will have beaten it in, and your job as a counselor is to work with other teachers to help them bring it out. Okay. Another thing you should make your goal is to help them to actually clarify some of the negative emotions that they have and why they have them, some of the issues that they have from home or from other life experiences, that you could help them to reframe and rechannel. For example, some of those whose parents might probably have died and then they are orphans. Some of them are vulnerable children. They still have parents, but the parents are really not responsible and all of that. And some of them are living with guardians and or grandparents and all of that. And your job is to help them identify and understand the situation they find themselves and how they can get the most out of their situation. So, what approach should you adopt as a counselor? There are several approaches you can adopt. You can get into one-on-one counseling with them. But before I go further on that, I think it's important to let you know that your first task is to secure their confidence. They must get to a point where they feel safe with you. You must give them an assurance that you are a destiny helper, you are a partner in progress. And that's why I will always tell you, as a counselor, don't appear to your student, your counselee, as a disciplinarian. In other words, don't let them see you as one of those who beats them in school, one of those who make them to cut grass, one of those wicked teachers, because it's difficult for young people in their mind to trust and rely on you when they feel that what comes from you is punitive. Okay, you must not put yourself in that situation. So you might need to discuss with your principal, on some of these things, on how to ensure that you are not seen in that bad light. All right. So having said that, you want to build confidentiality with them, and then probably engage in one-on-one counseling, one-on-one talk with them, as individuals, and then sometimes you are helping them as individuals to set goals for their lives, what they want to do. You are helping them to clarify their values. What are the values that they hold in life? What do they see as important? Young people really have very corrupt values. Some of them are very confused, and so you want to help them clarify their goals and clarify their values, what they hold important to them. Okay. And then sometimes you also want them to set up accountability structure where they are either accountable to their parents, accountable to their peers, or accountable to you. Helping them to just have that understanding that life cannot be done alone. They need to work with other people so that they can build something that will last and that will be helpful to them. All right. And then sometimes you might take it from just individual counseling to group counseling, and that's when you have them in groups of 5 before, and sometimes it could be the whole setting. So you do some workshop for them, you probably tell them stories, you probably show them films and all of that. And sometimes you even make them together to actually act plays. We call it role playing. So they act some particular plays from which they can learn. They learn one or two things and all of that. And then sometimes you might also group them according to how you want them to influence one another. So you call it peer mapping influence. In other words, you identify the ones who have leadership capacity, who are learning fast, and then you pair them with others who probably might not be learning fast and all that. Because young people have this tendency when they see somebody among them who seem to be leader, they want to follow, especially the female. In fact, both the male and the female. That's why you find out that the bad boys who are influential easily carry along other bad boys. The bad girls who are influential easily carry along the other bad. So why can't you use your understanding as a counselor to then pair those who are good, give them power, give them recognition that makes them feel like a leader, and then put some others around them who they can then lead and push forward. So having said that, you then now need to devise your own intervention strategies, your own practical strategy. And part of your practical strategy could be that you set up clubs, set up sporting activities to enhance behavioral change. Behavioral change doesn't happen accidentally, so you've got to actually set up activities that you can get them involved in to to engage their energy positively by probably setting up clubs, setting up projects that they are doing and all that, so that they can apply their mind, their emotions, and their energy towards it. And then sometimes you are helping them to also resolve conflict by actually training their mind to read, training them to manage their anger, training them about time management, training them on how to memorize. These are part of the things I probably will be sharing with you in subsequent edition on how to actually engage the student in your school. All right. And then finally, I think it's important for you to understand that sometimes you might need to involve parents, the parents of your student. You see, sometimes whatever you are doing, you probably need to engage parents so that parents can go along with you. And part of the things that you need to do when you are engaging parents, that you might need to train parents on how to handle their young people. Some parents don't know how to handle teenagers, so they talk to them anyhow. Their children. But so when they are at teenage age, teenage years, they have a feeling that they are now grown up, so they want to be respected. They want to be talked to in a particular way, and you need to train parents on how to understand them as such, so that the parents do not create problem for them in that way. So you have to teach them about communicating, communications skill training for parents with teenager. You want to actually you want to sometimes even have a synergy between yourself and the parents, so that probably sometimes you are communicating with parents what you are doing presently, and parents are communicating back with you, giving you feedback, so you are working hand in hand. But please take note of this. There comes a time where you find out that there are some things that you are doing with um, your teenager in your school, where you might need to refer them. I'd like you to know that as a counselor, we can't do it all. So we oftentimes work with other professionals. Sometimes we work with psychiatrists, sometimes we work with the police, sometimes we work with NSCDC, sometimes we work with doctors, sometimes we work with lawyers, and sometimes we work with other well-meaning individuals in the society. Okay, so those ones, they become people we can refer our young people to, and sometimes more like you are creating a support system. For example, we can also work with students who are in the university, who are alumni. Some of the students probably who are in the university who are doing well, they can come to school, because the age gap is not too far. So if you get a medical student, maybe in part 5 or part 6, who comes around to speak to young people, who speak to the young people in your school, have some session with them. That could be a form of motivation for them. So we call that support structure. So you can actually make those university students to become like a mentor to these young people. Sometimes you get role models for them even outside the school. People who are doing well, who you probably would bring to school, or you take students to actually challenge your mind, so that they can have a picture. The reason why this is necessary is that you've got to give young people something to look towards, something to want to become like, something they want to strive towards. You know, it is in giving this kind of picture that actually makes them strive towards becoming better. And guess what? If you do a very good job, I can tell you, in the next 3, 4, 5 years, you'll be shocked the kind of transformation you are bringing about in your school. So I'm working with you as we work with the Ministry of Education to ensure that the best come out of our young people. Till I come away with the next edition, because I'm going to be helping you to treat different issues as we go along. My name is Shegun Driebo. I'm generally called Destiny Coach on this project. And we are working together as counselors to bring about a change, a transformation in our society among our young people. More importantly, we want to redirect the energy of our young people. Thank you for listening. Watch out for the next edition.